Good morning, Westside.
Good morning.
I can't begin to tell you how wonderful it is to see all who are here today. It is Christmas at Westside, and many other places, I suppose. And to be honest, we didn't know if many people would show up this morning.
It was the email.
Thank you. Guilt works in Christmas too. Thank you for the gift of your presence. In fact, the worship team, the board and I, even talked about whether we should open the doors at all today. I mean, a lot of people are traveling out of state for the holidays. Many people have family obligations that entail running to other parts of the Metroplex to take part in long-held traditions. And some may have had little ones who got their parents up so early in the morning in anticipation of what Santa Claus delivered last night that they may not want to do anything but take a nap by 11 o'clock. I can still remember being like that myself as a little boy, hardly sleeping at all on Christmas Eve, wondering if Kris Kringle thought I was good enough to receive the multitude of gifts I had on my overly ambitious list, knowing that I had really been more naughty than nice during the year, but hoping the jolly old elf would overlook my social ineptitude and general obstinance. I would wake my parents up very, very early Christmas mornings to gently inquire whether it was time to open our gifts. They thought it was cute when I was a little boy, but were less enthralled as the years went by. By the time I was 22 years old, they said enough already. By then, my parents thought it was about time I remembered the reason for the season. And in my house, the reason for the season was the birth of the baby Jesus, the figure who was the Messiah, the Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life, they said. And it all began, I was told, on December 25th, some 2,000 years ago. By that time, by the time I was 22, I had begun to have difficulty with the story of Jesus. Because of my darned professors at Texas Christian University, I had started to read the biblical stories in a new way. The story was changing. Much like the responsive reading we shared just moments ago, the story changed for me in a way that did not leave much room for virgin births, for stars in the sky and angels appearing to shepherds in the field, for nativity scenes, or wise men traveling from the east. Yes, the story for me had changed. And to be honest with you, I wasn't very happy about it. If the birth of Jesus was so important, I wondered, why did the Gospels of Mark and John not mention it at all? And why did Matthew and Luke present different versions of the event that Christmas pageants simply mashed up together? It was not until many years later that I began to understand that these stories of Jesus were really never meant to be historical accounts of a little boy in a manger in Luke or in a home in Matthew. These were stories of a religious people doing their best with the circumstances presented to make sense of all that was before them in the world. And they were creating and adapting stories they thought would help them to be better human beings. You see, after your Messiah is executed by the state, you must redo, you must recreate a new story. For Matthew, it was important to to link Jesus back to Moses. So just like the story of Pharaoh hearing of a great leader coming and plots to kill all the newly born Jewish males, one finds baby Moses' mother putting him into the bulrushes. Similarly and purposefully, Matthew creates the story of King Herod the Great, hearing of the baby Jesus' birth, and because of his fear, orders the slaughter of the innocents, as Mary and Joseph and Jesus flee back to Egypt. For Luke, it is important that the account of Jesus' birth and message be spread to all, Jew and Gentile alike, to the rich, and maybe even more importantly, to the poor. So he creates a story where angels come to the lowliest of the low, the shepherds in the field, to proclaim the good news has come to all, even you, the shepherds. The Gospels do not all share these stories, but for both Matthew and Luke, it was important to use the imperial theological language of the day, that of the Emperor Caesar. Augustus was believed to be the Son of God. He was Lord and Savior of the world and was believed to be the one who brought peace on earth. So for both gospel writers, Jesus would be named, would become these things too. Jesus was Son of God, the Savior, the bringer of peace, not Caesar. It was important for the story, and the story was important. The way we tell a story is important too. So you may have heard that in a small southern town, there was a nativity scene that showed great skill and talent had gone into creating it. One small feature was, however, bothersome to a visitor from the north. The three wise men, you see, were wearing firemen's helmets. Totally unable to come up with a reason or explanation, the northerner left the display, and at a quick stop on the edge of town, he asked the woman behind the counter about the firemen's helmets. She exploded into a rage, yelling at him, "You stupid Yankees never do read the Bible." He assured her that he did, but simply couldn't recall anything about firemen in the Bible. She jerked the Bible from behind the counter and ruffled through some pages and finally jabbed her finger at a passage. Sticking it in his face, she said to him, "See, it says right here, 3 wise men came from afar." The way we tell a story is important. And sometimes, in order for a story to remain relevant today, the story must change. All of you know this, but this is also the time of Hanukkah. And like so many years before, for 8 days, this year from December 20th through the 28th, Jews all over the world will celebrate the Festival of Lights, where menorah candles are lit on the successive days to celebrate the story of the Maccabean revolt and the rededication of the Second Temple. Jews know something about changing stories in order to remain relevant. Just like early Christians had to change the story when Jesus was executed, as the Messiah was not supposed to end up nailed to a cross. Even earlier in history, the Jews had to change their story when exiled to Babylon, when the temple was destroyed. The religion had to be modified when its centerpiece, the temple, no longer existed in Israel. They eventually changed the story in order for it to remain relevant, to remain true. I was listening to an interview of Rabbi David Hartman the other day. I believe Hartman is classified as a conservative rabbi. Many believe he should be considered orthodox. I'm not so sure. He says some very progressive things, in my way of thinking. Born in Brooklyn, New York, and ordained at Yeshiva University, he later studied at the Roman Catholic Fordham University and earned a PhD in philosophy from McGill University while serving a congregation in Montreal, Canada. He moved to Israel in 1971 and founded the Shalom Hartman Institute, so named in memory of his father. There, he and others have taught what I believe to be a form of progressive religious pluralism. The influences of his thinking are some which are very familiar to me. Hartman speaks of William James and Peter Berger, and when you hear me talking about religion that can be alive with our actions, you are really hearing William James. When you hear me talking about the social construction of reality, you're really hearing Peter Berger. Many people who come from all over the world, it appears, has a crisis of faith when studying at the Shalom Hartman Institute. And they will come to Rabbi Hartman and say, "Rabbi, please don't be angry with me, but I have become an atheist while here." Hartman asked them when this happened, and the reply may well come on Wednesday. And when Hartman stops laughing, he asks, "How then has your behavior changed? Don't worry so much about God. Just keep being good. Just keep doing good." Hartman is aware these students' stories have changed. But he also understands their moral compass need not be affected. He knows what you and I know, that you can indeed be good without God, that one can be good for goodness' sake. But he said something else that stuck in my head, as I've often been one who is more disapproving of the Christmas story than perhaps need be. Hartman says, and mind you, these are his words rather than mine, he says, "Don't be critical like the mother-in-law who takes great joy in finding her son-in-law's faults. Instead, be critical out of compassion, because you love something so much that you will ask it to hear you, to consider possible change." My criticism of the Christmas story has been one of taking great joy in the discrepancies, the things I viewed as mistakes or even outright lies. My criticisms were often not out of compassion, but out of aggression. In fact, I wanted to tear it apart in a way that there'd be little doubt I was not affiliated with those believers who were obviously gullible, who were obviously naive, who were obviously unsophisticated. And then in my email inbox comes something from the American Humanist Association, of all places, a brief article written by Valerie Tarico, a psychologist who wrote a book titled Trusting Doubt. A former evangelical looks at old beliefs in a new light, a book that is now on my wish list. During this time of year, for many people who might not classify their beliefs as Christian, Tirico suggests that rather than aggressively criticizing the birth story of Jesus, humanists and others spend more time finding common ground with relatives. Admittedly, it may be just a good meal or a football game. But then even though you and I understand the things most people celebrate during this time of year have pagan origins, including the very date of December 25th itself, that we instead focus on what we can embrace as timeless and wise and meaningful, like any good story, and just move on. That we allow our love for mythology, from Gilgamesh to Frodo Baggins, to come out and play with others, instead of sometimes passively but aggressively bashing the story others hold so dear. These are astute observations in my mind. They're wonderful examples of finding compassionate themes rather than taking joy in finding faults, like the mother-in-law alluded to by Rabbi Hartman. So what is your story? And how has it changed? There may be plenty of reasons wherein this holiday is not the happiest for some of us. It could be that some of us are estranged from family. It could be that some of us are in relationships that no longer feed us. It could be that some of us are alienated from the faith of our youth. But at least in my estimation, the story is also that there are plenty of reasons to celebrate. So do you open the doors of a Unitarian Universalist Church on December 25th? Well, hell yes you do. Because it could be for many of us, Westside and places like it are the best places to be on Christmas Day. For here you are among others who also appreciate a religious tradition that melds together your heart and your mind, where questions are welcomed, where you are not limited to one sacred book, but are able to search for your truth wherever it leads, and where we understand revelation continues. Christmas is no longer about gifts for me, of course not. I'm no longer that young boy waking up his parents to see what Santa Claus has left under the tree. But I'm also no longer that 22 or 32 or 42-year-old who wants to bash a faith tradition which no longer is my most appropriate path to what is true. For me, this holiday season is now about anticipation. As one year ends and another begins, I wonder what experiences this new year will bring for me and Gail, and how I can be actively involved in making those experiences positive. And this time of year is also about community. Friends who perhaps visit from Ohio. My own family, because I'm fortunate in that my family is a safe place to be. My church family, because we are able to honor each other's search, and we understand when our story must change. For me, the story of Unitarian Universalism itself has changed. It's no longer about the idea that God is Trinitarian or Unitarian, that the idea of God is one. It's not that God is too good to damn anyone to hell, but offers every one of us universal salvation. Unitarian now indicates to me that all of humanity is united. We are bound together for good or ill. We are one. And universalism now signifies to me the ideal of universal love. Love for myself, love for all others, love for the earth. Together, Unitarian Universalism means humanity can be united in love. And like those others, my religion is about trying to be a better human being today than I was yesterday. Not because of a festival of lights or a boy born in a manger or an apartment, but because that is what my faith calls me to do in the here and now. To extend love to all. To extend compassion as far as I possibly can or learn how to. That is now what Unitarian Universalism is for me. And like so many worthwhile ideas, it is simple, but it is not easy. So what is your story? And how has it changed? Stories are important. After all, a Savior who brings peace on earth and goodwill to all is a wonderful story. But your story is important too. You also have good news. Be courageous in telling your story while being respectful of others. Perhaps that is the reason for the season. As we rise together, in body or spirit, join in singing our closing hymn, number 248, Oh, We Believe in Christmas. Let's sing all four verses. I think we have